Welcome to TAPAS, teaching about the prevention of abuse in Surrey. Today we will be hearing from Sam. Sam is a survivor of domestic abuse, and as part of the 16 days of action, she talks to us about her experience of coercive control with her ex-partner. Sam describes upsetting and distressing forms of abuse, so viewer discretion is advised.
So one of the things that I actually talk about a lot now is if we're not talking about coercive control, we're not talking about domestic abuse, because coercive control is there right at the beginning and it's there at the end as well. So for me, when I met him that Friday night, he was just so charming. The conversation was just like any other conversation. I opened up to him about where I worked, where I lived, the relationship I had with my mom and the relationship I had with my friends as well. So when I moved in with him 2 weeks after I met him, which is a massive, massive red flag, the relationship moved far too quickly. But again, he just seemed this caring, charming person who was just really interested in me.
Early declarations of love, fast-paced commitments like moving in, proposals, or suggesting joint bank accounts can signal a need for power and control. They can be an early warning sign, even if they seem loving and caring at the time.
I noticed subtle changes when I moved into his flat with him, and it would start off, oh, don't go and see your mum tonight. If you love me, you won't go. And I think when we're all in that new situation, in that relationship, we do want to spend time with that person. So again, I didn't see anything wrong with that. And that one night I didn't go and see my mum. It's the same with friends. I got up, dressed up on Friday night to go out with a girlfriend. We went to the pub. Within 5 minutes of just walking into the pub, I hadn't even ordered my first drink. There was just a bombardment of phone calls and text messages. Why have you left me on my own? Where are you? Why have you gone out dressed like that? It's only so you can attract men. I hadn't even had a sip of my first drink. I went back because there was just no point being out. I couldn't enjoy myself.
Sam started to adapt and change her lifestyle and habits due to her partner's behaviour. Jealousy and isolation crept in.
When I met him, I was a legal secretary and I absolutely loved my job. And the odd thing he would say, and again at the time I just found it really odd, was the only way you got that job was by sleeping with your boss. There's no way someone of 21 years old could get a job like that. And when he said it, I just thought it was bizarre until he locked me in the flat one morning and threw my mobile phone out the 7th floor window so I couldn't go to work. And when I managed to get free 2 days later and tried to make that disclosure to my boss, that was the first and last disclosure I ever made because I was instantly sacked. So for me, coercive control is all about power and control. He had power and control over everything that I did. And once I got the sack from that job, that is when the control increased. So of course I could go and see my mom. Of course I phoned my mom. Of course I did those things. But there was always a consequence that I had to pay. So one morning around 2 o'clock, we're in bed. He got up to, normally you would think he was going to the toilet. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, which was on silent. He went into the hallway outside the bedroom and he rang my phone, which was on silent. He came into the bedroom, picked me up, threw me across the room, and again, another mobile phone out of the window. Consequence of phoning my mom. I went out one night with a group of friends. Again, the pub was literally 5-10 minutes away. When I got back home that night, he made me take off my underwear so he could smell to see if I'd had sex with somebody else. So again, that's a consequence of just going out with friends. I was really lucky and found a couple of temporary part-time jobs. He came to the workplace unannounced, bombardment of telephone calls every day. Again, it was another job that I was sacked from. So when we talk about coercive control, there are no visible injuries, but it's all about that power and control. So from someone who was really bubbly to someone who didn't even know how to put a sentence together, that is the core of what domestic abuse is. That is coercive control.
Sam was put down, degraded, humiliated and made to feel subordinate by her partner. This is a common tactic of coercive controllers as it established a hierarchy in the relationship. Abusers use this to seize even more power and control.
And I often talk about something called the ABC of coercive control. So when we talk about domestic abuse, we often think straight away of physical violence, and we've got those injuries that we can see. But with coercive control, we can't, it's really hard to identify, because even survivors who are experiencing coercive control don't know what they're experiencing until it's too late. So the ABC of coercive control is a person's appearance. I was really smartly dressed. My hair was always done. I was always immaculate, and then suddenly it changed. My body language, I'd always speak like this. I'd never make eye contact with anybody, male, female, family, friends, because he'd always accuse me of having an affair with that person just by making eye contact with someone. So I didn't do it. And C is conversation. I didn't know how to communicate with people anymore, because if I had a long conversation with somebody, I was accused of having an affair. So it would just be, yeah, okay. And it would be like that. And it's those things, those subtle things that we have to look out for in someone who we might be working with, a loved one or a family member, to see if, they're experiencing coercive control and domestic abuse. It's really difficult for the person who is, like myself, who was experiencing it. I didn't know what I was going to say in my disclosure when I made it, but I expected my boss to at least have a couple of minutes to listen. He just instantly dismissed me, didn't want to hear, didn't want to do anything. So that had a massive impact on me. I didn't want to tell any other professional, because I just assumed they're not going to listen, they're not going to believe me. So I never made a disclosure again. And that is the impact that coercive control can have on a person as well. Again, when we talk about domestic abuse, we understand the physical, but I don't think we talk about the psychological impact it has on us. So for me, existing in that situation, I was with a perpetrator for 3 years. For those 3 years, I just existed. He programmed me to be the person he wanted me to be, so he could easily control and manipulate me. And I had to do what I had to do to stay alive. So for those 3 years, I'm existing, I'm walking on eggshells, and I've got to try and keep myself safe. So I'm safeguarding myself all the time. He was an alcoholic. And yes, there were times when I had to go out and buy him his drink, and people might think, well, why would you do that? Because if I didn't, there would be a consequence, and who knows what he would do to me. On the flip side of that, yes, he was an alcoholic, and he could have done something to me with or without the drink. But someone existing with a perpetrator, we know everything about them as well. We have to learn very, very quickly. So for me, there was always a look or a stare or a glance, and he would clench his fists. And then I knew something was going to happen. And it wasn't always violence, it wasn't always physical, but you learn to read their body language, and we have to kind of do that to stay safe. In that situation, I was always on autopilot. You just got to do what you've got to do to stay alive. There were times when I'd never have a wash. I wouldn't even have a wash. I wouldn't brush my teeth. I wouldn't brush my hair. I wouldn't put any makeup on or do my skincare or anything like that, because he would always accuse me of having an affair. Why are you putting that on? Why are you getting dressed? Why are you doing that? So for me, it was easier not to do those things, because you just really, really questioned. I found the strength and courage to escape that situation in November 2006. So it's almost 20 years really since I've been out of that situation, and the perpetrator I existed with is now deceased. But the impact it's had on my life has been immense. It's been massive. It's like swings and roundabouts. It's like you're on a massive roller coaster and you don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next, because this person, and don't forget, when we meet them, we fall in love with that caring partner. They're very charming, they're very caring. We love them and we just assume they love us, but they don't. They love that power and control that they have over us. So when you've got someone who's manipulating you and brainwashing you, saying you're fat, you're ugly, you're worthless, no one's going to like you, and it's like a dripping tap, you hear that constantly, and you start to believe that, because the coercive control and controlling behaviour and that power and control breaks you down psychologically. It breaks you down piece by piece. So when you do find that strength and courage to escape, you've still got those thoughts in your head. Even though people might say, oh, you know, you look great, you're doing really well. It doesn't matter, because he is still subconsciously in my mind.
The impact of the coercive and controlling abuse that Sam suffered still affects her in many ways, even years later. We must be careful not to underestimate the enduring psychological and physical aftermath that survivors are left with by their abusers. This often leaves them questioning their whole identity, self-worth and ability to cope.
Looking back on my lived experience, I think the one thing I would like to say to anyone who might be listening today, that if you're experiencing coercive control and domestic abuse, it's really important to understand it's not your fault. It's not because of something you've said, not because of what you've done or what you're wearing. That's what perpetrators tell us and brainwash into believing. It is not your fault. I didn't wake up that Friday morning and think I want to meet someone and I want them to treat me that way. Perpetrators choose to treat people that way because it's all about power and control, and that's why we have to keep talking about coercive control, because that is at the core root of what domestic abuse is. And I also understand how really difficult it is for friends, family, colleagues, and even professionals to understand our lived experience and to also try and encourage us to speak. It's really, really hard because we don't trust anyone, even the genuine people who really want to help us and who want to support us, because, again, as I've said, we've been brainwashed and manipulated. No one's going to believe you. Everyone's going to hate you. You're going to have the children to cough you. So really, your job is to kind of unprogram how we've been programmed, and that is really, really difficult. But I think for me, I think the simplest thing someone could have asked me when I was in that situation is, are you okay? That would have planted a seed. The focus and the question is talking directly to me as Sam, and it's asking how I am. And I might not have answered straight away, but if I was asked it a second time, then I would have had that courage to open up. So I think as human beings, we all want to rush in and save survivors and kind of get really involved. We don't have to do that to support someone in that situation. Just start the conversation with, are you okay? And I think it's also important to say that when we do, for survivors, when we do talk about it, there are specialist services out there which will have links at the bottom of the video for you to have a look at. There are specialist services out there to support you when you're ready to make that disclosure. And it is really important to understand that you're not alone. For me, when I never ever opened up and I didn't speak to anyone, I just thought I was the only one who was experiencing this. It's only since I've come out of that situation that we have these conversations, and it's like there's lots and lots of people listening today. They might have lived experience. It can happen to any one of us. So I think it's about focusing on the survivor, asking the simple question, are you okay? And that can lead to great discussions and hopefully people making that disclosure.
If you feel that it may help to talk to someone about your relationship, contact one of the local Surrey support services or national helplines. Details are in the comment section below the video or on the ESDAS website at www.esdas.org.uk. If you feel you may be in immediate danger, always dial 999. Remember, you are not alone. There is hope after abuse.